That day, standing in front of the counter at the private testing laboratory in New York, my heart was already pounding against my ribs. My palms were sweating so much that the paper number ticket stuck to my skin. The technician slid a sealed envelope across the desk with my name on it. It had been 10 agonizing days since I dropped off the sample. I had paid $250 for a complete chemical analysis of the herbal tea. For just a few sheets of paper, it was a lot of money. But I never once felt it was a waste. The technician handing me the envelope looked around cautiously and lowered his voice. "I don't know if I should say this," he murmured, "but this sample is quite a unique case, so we ran cross-checks on it twice. We thought it might be a machine error, but the same result came out both times. The results are absolutely accurate, so you can trust what you read." "Twice?" I asked. "What on earth did you find in it?" "It's all detailed in the report," he replied softly. "I think it's better if you see for yourself. And please, brace yourself before you read it." The words "brace yourself" echoed in my ears like a siren. I sat down on a cold plastic chair in the hallway and tore the envelope open. My fingertips were trembling uncontrollably. In the detected substances column, the bold black letters jumped off the page. Synthetic progestin and estrogen. It was the exact chemical compound of oral birth control pills. Right next to it was a medical note stating that long-term exposure was highly suspected. The liquid I had submitted for testing was the custom wellness tonic my mother-in-law had prepared for me without missing a single day for 7 years. It was 7 years of going from one fertility clinic to another, shedding endless tears because I could not get pregnant. The true nature of those 7 years was now captured on a single sheet of white paper. Sitting in my SUV in the parking lot, I couldn't even turn the key in the ignition. I read the lab results over and over again. No matter how many times I stared at the letters, they didn't change. Thinking I might be hallucinating, I traced every single word with my index finger. Tears did not fall. Instead, a rage so intense that it made my teeth grind together surged up my throat. The endless rows of mugs filled with that bitter dark tea I had completely drained over the last 7 years flashed before my eyes. Whenever I would grimace at the bitter taste, my mother-in-law would hand me a peppermint candy with a sweet smile. The true nature of that seemingly affectionate gesture was written right here on this paper. I folded the results and shoved them deep into the inside pocket of my designer handbag. Then, I drove back to our estate in Connecticut as if nothing had happened. Standing in front of the heavy mahogany front door, I could hear the clattering of pots from the designer kitchen. I took 3 deep breaths. Just like any other day, I adjusted my grip on the grocery bags. Grabbing the brass doorknob, I made up my mind. From today on, I would no longer live as a daughter-in-law, but as a witness. I am going to retrace the last 7 years that led to this single piece of paper landing in my hands. The story goes back 7 years. I married my husband despite the extreme opposition of my mother-in-law, Eleanor. Because my family had struggled financially after my father's business went under, I brought absolutely no wealth into the marriage. At the rehearsal dinner at their exclusive country club, Eleanor looked me up and down with sheer disgust. "I've never in my life seen a bride come in empty-handed," she sneered. "You bring nothing but the clothes on your back, and what do you expect to achieve here? Mark my words. This marriage won't last. Just you wait." "Mother, if you say that one more time, I will walk away from this family," my husband Mark fired back. "Even if I have to cut ties and leave this estate, I am marrying this woman. I mean it from the bottom of my heart." When her precious son threatened to cut ties, Eleanor finally backed down. We barely managed to get through the wedding ceremony. Even at the reception, Eleanor never cracked a single smile. When it was time for the guests to toss the birdseed and flower petals as we left the venue, Eleanor threw a handful of hard rice directly at my face with stinging force. We could not afford to buy a house in a decent neighborhood on our own. So Mark and I started our married life, living in the sprawling guest wing of his parents' Connecticut mansion. During our first year of marriage, I lost my first baby just 2 months into the pregnancy. Consumed by the guilt of failing to protect that tiny life, I became bedridden. I could not crawl out from under the heavy down comforter for days. Then, an unexpected guest walked into my bedroom. It was Eleanor, carrying an expensive cold-pressed juicer and a large box of boutique naturopathic liquid supplements. "It is my duty to restore my sick daughter-in-law's health," she declared. From today on, I am going to prepare this custom holistic blend myself, so drink it without a word of complaint. True wellness requires dedication. Anything bought off a shelf is not going to help you. Eleanor set up the expensive cold-pressed juicer on the granite island in the kitchen. She meticulously mixed the dark, bitter tonic into glass wellness vials and stacked them neatly in the refrigerator. Every morning and evening, she would heat one up, pour it into a ceramic mug, and place it right in front of me. Yet, while her hands poured out supposed devotion, her mouth became that of a completely different person. I feed you all this expensive medicine, and still there is no news. There must be something genetically wrong with you, she would hiss. I don't know what I did to deserve watching my only son tied to a woman who can't even give this family a legacy. At every Thanksgiving dinner, she would point to the empty bedroom upstairs in front of all the extended family. That is the room we left empty for a grandchild, she would announce loudly. The years pass and it only gathers dust. At this rate, our family's legacy is going to end with Mark. The judging eyes of the relatives would collectively pour over me. Feeling so humiliated and isolated, I soaked my pillow with tears night after night. Still, I genuinely believed that her daily effort of brewing that herbal tea was an act of pure care. I tried to fulfill my duty as a daughter-in-law by drinking every last drop of that bitter liquid without leaving a trace. 7 years passed just like that. A baby never came. One night, I carefully brought the topic up to Mark in bed. "Honey, let's go to a specialist," I whispered. "I want to try IVF, anything. I truly can't take this anymore." "Okay, let's go," Mark agreed softly, pulling me close. "I can't stand watching you suffer all by yourself anymore. If there is a medical option, we have to try it." We booked a consultation at a top fertility clinic in Manhattan. I had absolutely no idea that this trip to the city would be the catalyst for unraveling everything. The day of the appointment arrived. Unfortunately, Mark was on a business trip in Chicago, so I went to the Manhattan clinic alone. After going through the pre-screening and having several vials of blood drawn, I waited in the posh lobby for what felt like hours. Finally called into the office, the specialist tilted his head as he studied the results on his monitor. "This is very strange," the doctor murmured. "Your hormone levels. This is the exact pattern we see in women who have been taking oral contraceptives. And not just for a few months, but for a very, very long time. Are you currently taking any prescription medications?" "Medications?" I asked, confused. "I don't take any pills at all. The only thing I consume daily is a custom herbal wellness tea my mother-in-law prepares for me. She makes it to help me get pregnant." "Doctor, how does that have anything to do with this?" "Herbal tea?" The doctor sighed, leaning back. "I cannot definitively say what is in that tea. However, medically speaking, your body is in a state of prolonged exposure to birth control hormones. In this condition, it would be difficult to conceive even if you tried for 10 years, let alone 7. If that tea is the only thing you are taking, there are private labs that can analyze its chemical composition. I strongly advise you to look into it." I had never even touched a birth control pill in my life. Sitting in that leather chair in the consultation room, a freezing chill ran straight down my spine. The only thing flashing through my mind was that dark, bitter liquid in the ceramic mug. Between the horrific thought of what if and the desperate hope of surely not, I was violently shaken all night long. What terrified me most was that the surely not side of my brain was rapidly shrinking. The next day, as soon as I got home, I opened the stainless steel refrigerator. I slipped one of the sealed pouches of tea into my purse. I drove straight to a private chemical testing facility in New York and commissioned an analysis. Terrified that Eleanor might intercept the mail at the estate, I listed my mother's address in New Jersey for the results to be delivered. The document I received 10 days later was the very report I had just read. The 10 days of waiting for those results felt like walking on a sheet of thin ice. I tiptoed across that ice, wearing the mask of an innocent, unsuspecting daughter-in-law. I cooked dinner, set the dining table, and smiled exactly when I was supposed to smile. Even on the evening of the day I confirmed the horrific truth, Eleanor opened my bedroom door right on schedule. She held a silver tray carrying a steaming mug of that dark tea. "Drink it quickly," she ordered. "These active ingredients lose their potency if they sit. Do not leave a single drop." "Yes, Eleanor. I am always so grateful you make this for me," I replied smoothly. Without changing my expression, I took the mug from her hands. I even brought it to my lips and made a swallowing motion. The second Eleanor turned her back to head downstairs to the kitchen, I poured the entire mug down my ensuite bathroom sink without making a sound. I watched the dark poison swirl down the drain until the very last drop vanished. It was the first time in 7 years I had not drained the cup. I began secretly smuggling the unheated pouches out of the fridge one by one. I hid them in a lockbox under my bed, stacking them up as undeniable evidence. Then, looking at the calendar, I waited for one specific day. It was the day of Eleanor's monthly charity gala committee trip, where she would be out of the house from early morning until late at night. The morning of the trip finally dawned. Eleanor walked out the front door carrying her prized Hermes Birkin bag. "I will be going to the spa in the city with the committee ladies today," she announced. "I will be very late tonight, so make sure you eat properly. Just heat up the leftovers in the fridge and make sure the security alarm is set." "Yes, Mother, please do not worry about the house and have a wonderful time," I said cheerfully. "Since you rarely get to enjoy a day out, take all the time you need." I even walked her all the way to the driveway and waved until her Mercedes disappeared down the street. Even after hearing the heavy iron gates click shut, I waited a long time. I looked out the living room window and confirmed that Richard, my father-in-law, had also left for his weekly golf tournament. I checked twice, 3 times, to ensure I was absolutely alone in the massive house. Then, I stood in front of the master bedroom door. My hand gripping the heavy brass knob grew tense. I had lived in this house for 7 years, but on that particular day, that door felt like the entrance to a stranger's house. I went straight for the massive walk-in closet. When I pulled out the deep bottom drawer beneath her designer sweaters, folded cashmere blankets came into view. Lifting the heavy cashmere, my fingers brushed against a crinkling black plastic bag. I pulled it out. The logo printed on the bag belonged to a pharmacy, but it was not our local pharmacy in Greenwich. It was from the neighboring town of Stamford. The moment I opened the bag, my breathing completely stopped. Dozens of foil blister packs of pills were piled so high they looked ready to spill over. Before touching anything, I pulled out my smartphone. I took multiple high-resolution photos of exactly how the bag looked sitting inside the drawer. Then, I picked up one of the blister packs and checked the back. I immediately typed the printed brand name into Google. The screen instantly displayed the name of a highly potent commercial birth control pill. Right under the word indications, the phrase ovulation suppression was written in glaringly clear text. The hand holding the pharmacy bag froze completely stiff. Knowing the truth through a piece of paper was entirely different from holding the physical weapon in my own hands. The letters on the lab report had morphed into tangible, undeniable objects. The strength vanished from my legs, and I nearly collapsed onto the plush closet carpet, gripping the mahogany dresser just to stay upright. Forcing myself to stay conscious, I counted the blister packs one by one. There was enough here to last for several years. The reason she drove past 3 local pharmacies to go all the way to Stamford suddenly made perfect sense. She was deliberately hiding her tracks from the local pharmacists who knew our family. Tucked into the crevices of the bag was a wad of yellowed, faded papers. They were pharmacy receipts with timestamps printed on them. The receipt at the very bottom was so faded that the ink looked like it would crumble at a mere touch. It was the physical evidence of the passing years, receipts she was too paranoid to throw in the trash, but had hoarded away in secret. I did not even need to ask where all this had been used. I gathered the black plastic bag and the thick wad of receipts and held them tightly against my chest. Using the photos on my phone, I meticulously rearranged the cashmere blankets in the drawer, exactly as they had been. I even matched the angle of the folds against the pictures. By the time I stepped out of the master bedroom, cold sweat was soaking through the underarms of my blouse. That night, I hid everything I had taken at the very bottom of a vintage suitcase I had brought from my parents' house years ago. Now, in this entire estate, I was the only person who knew the terrifying truth. I gathered all the evidence in one place. The sample pouches of herbal tea, the Stamford pharmacy bag, and the lab analysis report were all neatly packed into the suitcase. I locked the suitcase and hid the tiny key inside the zippered lining of my wallet. I hauled the heavy suitcase down to the garage and shoved it deep into the trunk of my SUV. I knew better than anyone that nowhere inside that house was safe anymore. There was only one problem left to solve. Did my husband know about this? That evening, after my parents-in-law had retired to their suite early, Mark and I were sitting alone at the kitchen island finishing our dinner. I casually tossed out a passing remark. "Honey, what do you honestly think?" I asked smoothly. "About that wellness tea your mother brews for me. Do you think it is actually doing my body any good?" "Well, you have been drinking it for 7 years because it must be doing something right," Mark replied easily. "A mother's devotion does not just vanish into thin air. Seeing her up at the crack of dawn tending to that machine makes me feel nothing but grateful." "Why? Is the taste getting too bitter lately?" "No, I just wondered because it has been 7 years and still no good news, so the thought randomly crossed my mind." I deflected. Mark simply finished his bowl of soup and laughed his usual good-natured laugh. He did not stumble over his words, nor did his eyes waver even for a fraction of a second. I decided to push just one step further. I walked over to the fridge, pulled out one of the sealed pouches, heated it up, and placed the steaming mug right in front of him. "If it is such great medicine, why do you not drink some?" I urged. "You have looked so exhausted lately." "Whoa, wait a minute," Mark protested, pushing the cup away. "Mother strictly emphasized that this is exclusively for your fertility and health. She warned me a dozen times that not a single drop should be wasted on anyone else. You drink it, honey." He slid the mug back to my side of the island. I did not back down. I slid it right back to him. "Today, I want to take care of your health," I insisted gently. "Just one cup. We will keep it a secret from your mother. Please?" "Oh, all right, fine. If you say so, I guess one cup won't hurt," Mark chuckled. "Thanks, honey. Bottoms up." Mark grabbed the handle and chugged the dark liquid in one long gulp. He completely contorted his face at the awful bitter taste, but he laughed heartily right after. It was an expression a man could never make if he knew he was drinking poison. Looking at his face as he put the empty mug down, there was not a single shadow of guilt. In that exact moment, I made my final conclusion. This man truly knows absolutely nothing. The terrifying worry that my husband might be an accomplice was completely lifted from my shoulders that night. For the first time in 7 years, Mark's face looked like it belonged to someone completely on my side. However, I decided to keep my mouth shut for just a little longer. If I clumsily revealed the truth and Mark panicked or confronted her too early, the evidence could be compromised. I resolved to hold all the cards close to my chest until my hand was absolutely bulletproof. A few days later, a strange sensation washed over my body. The strange sensation was violent nausea. For several consecutive days, my stomach would turn completely upside down the moment I woke up. Clinging to a fragile sliver of hope, I bought a pregnancy test from the local pharmacy. Locking the bathroom door, the few minutes I spent holding my breath felt like hours. Then, two vivid pink lines appeared in the window. My hands were shaking so violently that I rushed out, bought 2 more tests, and checked again. They were all positive. The following day, the Manhattan specialist confirmed that I was naturally 5 weeks pregnant. It had barely been 2 months since I stopped drinking that spiked tea. It was a baby that had taken root like a miracle. This tiny heartbeat was the living, breathing proof of exactly who the culprit behind my 7-year infertility was. Holding the ultrasound photo against my chest, I stood frozen in the clinic hallway for a very long time. As it happened, Richard's 70th birthday dinner was scheduled for that weekend in the grand formal dining room of our estate. It was a massive gathering with all the extended relatives and aunts and uncles present. I calculated that this was the absolute perfect moment. Right when the clinking of expensive wine glasses and loud laughter peaked, I slowly stood up from my chair. "Happy birthday, Richard," I announced clearly. "And since all the elders are gathered here today, I have something very special to share. I am pregnant. I am 5 weeks along." The grand dining room fell dead silent for a split second before erupting into sheer chaos. "What did you just say? Pregnant?" Richard shouted, his face turning bright red with joy. "Oh my lord, out of all the birthday gifts I have received in my 70 years, this is the absolute greatest. Finally, a true blessing has come to our family. A true blessing. Everyone, raise your glasses." A toast. Honey, are you serious? Mark yelled, practically jumping out of his seat. Why did you not tell me? How can the husband be the last to know? Oh my God, look at my hands. I am physically shaking. I wanted to wait until the doctor confirmed it was absolutely certain. I smiled warmly at him. I am sorry if you felt left out, honey. Richard slapped his knee and roared with laughter. Applause and endless blessings poured across the long mahogany table from all the relatives. Aunt Susan even dabbed at her eyes with a linen napkin, crying about how it had been 7 long years. In the middle of all that joyous uproar, I kept my eyes locked on exactly one person, Eleanor. Amidst the roaring laughter, her face alone was turning the color of wet ash. I did not miss the way the hand gripping her silver fork trembled uncontrollably. A face frozen from sudden joy and a face frozen from a collapsing scheme look entirely different. Hers was the face of a woman realizing that 7 years of secretly dosing her daughter-in-law had just been blown to pieces. Eleanor could not bring herself to offer a single word of congratulations. I need to clear the plates. The food is getting cold, she muttered abruptly. Tossing out that single sentence, she practically fled into the kitchen. Soon after, the harsh, aggressive sounds of expensive porcelain slamming against the granite counters echoed out from the kitchen. It was such a reckless, violent noise that it sounded like the plates were about to shatter. Watching her retreating back, my conviction solidified into steel. Maintaining my bright, glowing smile as I accepted the relatives' blessings, I quietly began calculating my next devastating move. Starting a few days after the birthday dinner, Eleanor's attitude completely transformed into something sickeningly sweet. Every morning, a plate of meticulously sliced premium fruit appeared outside my bedroom door. The mouth that had done nothing but spit insults for 7 years suddenly began calling me sweetheart in a sugary tone. That sudden, artificial warmth felt like a cold dagger pressed against my spine. Then, one afternoon, Eleanor sat me down on the velvet sofa with a fiercely determined look on her face. Sweetheart, there is nothing better for a pregnant woman than traditional holistic medicine, she cooed, patting my knee. I am going to have a special custom herbal batch brewed just to make the baby strong. I already called a premium naturopath in the city and ordered the most expensive herbs. This batch is going to be incredibly special. They say it is absolutely vital for the fetus. Eleanor had already hauled the electric brewer out of the pantry and set it proudly on the kitchen counter. The polished glass and steel machine gleamed menacingly under the recessed lighting. Staring right into the dark, gaping mouth of that machine, I maintained my perfectly polite smile. Mother, I will gratefully accept only the thought behind it, I replied softly but firmly. But they say taking unregulated herbs during pregnancy can cause catastrophic damage. My OBGYN in Manhattan strictly ordered me not to let anything touch my lips unless it is a verified medical prescription. He specifically pinpointed unregulated herbal teas and said, absolutely not. We cannot let anything happen to the baby, right? You are being entirely too dramatic, Eleanor scoffed, rolling her eyes. Women back in the day drank this and gave birth just fine. What do modern doctors know anyway? Your mother-in-law is offering to brew this with her own 2 hands, and you are just going to kick my devotion to the curb? I appreciate your devotion, Mother, I said smoothly. But this concerns the baby's life, so this time, I am going to follow the doctor's exact orders. Please understand. Eleanor clicked her tongue loudly in annoyance, but she backed down for the day. That night, I texted Mark a series of medical articles about the extreme dangers of consuming unknown herbal supplements during early pregnancy. Mark immediately texted back, saying I was absolutely right and promising he would handle his mother himself. I had successfully recruited my husband as a shield in advance. Late that night, when I stepped out to get a glass of water, I walked past the dark kitchen. Eleanor was standing there without the lights on, aggressively scrubbing the inside of the brewing machine. The sound of the steel wool violently scraping against the glass was exceptionally savage. Right around that time, I started noticing strange signs that someone was rummaging through my bedroom. If I stepped out for just a little while, the door I had shut tight would be left slightly ajar. The expensive creams and perfumes on my vanity were shifted by subtle fractions of an inch. I had already moved everything that actually mattered to the trunk of my SUV long ago. Still, I needed absolute confirmation. I placed a single strand of hair across the doorframe before leaving. When I saw that the hair had fallen to the floor 2 days in a row, I was certain someone was frantically tearing through my room, looking for something. Meanwhile, a beautiful wedding invitation arrived in the mail for Mark's younger cousin. The day of the extravagant country club wedding arrived. After the ceremony, the extended family gathered at a long banquet table in the grand reception hall. From the moment we were seated, I had a specific calculation in mind. I purposely chose the seat directly across from Eleanor, ensuring my voice would project perfectly into her ears. After the initial rounds of blessings for the newlyweds circled the table, the conversation naturally shifted over to me. Being pregnant after 7 years, everyone had to add their 2 cents. I was receiving more congratulations than the bride and groom. After graciously absorbing all the compliments, I casually dropped the bomb I had prepared. I am so grateful to everyone for the blessings. I smiled brightly. But honestly, there is one thing I find incredibly strange. You know that special wellness tea Mother used to brew for me? Every time I drank it, my body felt unnervingly heavy and dizzy. Lately, I cannot stop wondering if that tea was the exact reason I could not get pregnant for 7 years. It is just such a strange coincidence. The clattering of silverware across the massive table abruptly stopped. Aunt Susan, sitting to my left, leaned in with a deeply concerned look. What kind of medicine was it that makes you say something like that? It made you dizzy? How bad was it? I have never in my life heard of health supplements making someone dizzy. The dizziness was so severe I actually had to go to the clinic for it, I replied loudly. But it is just like magic, Aunt Susan. The second I stopped drinking that tea, my body felt incredibly light. And within 2 months of stopping, boom, the baby finally took root. The mention of going to the clinic sent a massive ripple of shock through the table. At the part where I said I got pregnant the moment I stopped the tea, several relatives exchanged deeply suspicious glances. However, some of the older, more conservative relatives immediately stiffened and began to scold me. "Now listen here, Sarah," Uncle Robert barked. "You cannot just say whatever pops into your head. Do you really think your own mother-in-law would feed you something dangerous? To take the devotion of a woman who woke up at dawn for 7 years straight to brew that for you and twist it like this? You are acting incredibly ungrateful. You should know better than to run your mouth like this on such a joyous day." "Honey, what is wrong with you?" Mark hissed, grabbing my arm under the table. "Why are you speaking about my mother like that? If you felt sick, just say you felt sick. You do not need to blame the tea." Imagine how heartbroken Mother must feel hearing this. Acting exactly as I had planned, I immediately bowed my head in submissive apology. "I am so sorry," I murmured softly. "I was just talking about how my body felt. I did not mean anything malicious by it." I pretended to retreat, but the reality was that every single word I had spoken was a calculated dagger aimed directly at one specific person. Keeping my head slightly bowed, I raised only my eyes to look directly across the table. Eleanor's hands were flailing in a blind panic, and she knocked her crystal water goblet completely over. The ice water soaked into the expensive linen tablecloth, rapidly spreading toward her lap. But she was so paralyzed by terror, she did not even think to wipe it up. I carved the image of her frantic, trembling fingertips permanently into my memory. If she were an innocent person, she would have aggressively defended herself and yelled at me. Seeing her completely unravel with a guilty conscience in front of the entire family was exactly the confirmation I wanted. On the drive back to the estate, Eleanor could not bring herself to speak a single word. Staring at the back of her head as she looked out the passenger window, I whispered quietly in my mind, "This is only the beginning." A few days later, it was time for my routine checkup at the Manhattan OB/GYN. Because the clinic was backed up, the appointments and ultrasounds took up the entire afternoon. Having just listened to the baby's strong heartbeat, my footsteps were light and happy as I approached the front door. However, the moment I stepped into the grand foyer, I froze dead in my tracks. The door to my bedroom on the second floor was thrown wide open. The vintage lockbox I had hidden under the bed had been dragged out into the absolute center of the room. And standing right in front of it, breathing heavily, was Eleanor. Her hands were clutching a massive bundle of the sealed tea pouches. Dozens of unopened glass vials were spilled out of the ripped box and scattered across the expensive hardwood floor. It was the undeniable proof that I had stopped drinking her poison long ago. Eleanor violently hurled the bundle of pouches right at my feet. One of the plastic seams burst open on impact, splattering the dark, bitter liquid across the baseboards. "What the hell is this?" she shrieked, her face purple with rage. "Tell me what this is. This is the holistic tonic I woke up at the crack of dawn to prepare for you. Why didn't you drink the tonic I made with my own blood and sweat and hide it here like a rat? You threw away the medicine your mother-in-law provided? How can a human being do something so vile? Do you even have the right to call yourself a part of this family?" The veins in her neck bulged out as she screamed at the top of her lungs. I did not step back, not even an inch. I did not avert my eyes either. I stared directly into Eleanor's furious eyes. And, enunciating every single syllable with cold precision, I spoke, because I knew I should not drink it. That is why I stopped. I have to protect my own body, after all. "What? What did you just say? Knew you should not drink it?" she stammered, her voice cracking. "Protect your body? What are you implying I did to you? Why? Why are you saying you cannot drink health tea?" "You know better than anyone, Mother," I said, my voice dropping to an icy whisper. "You know exactly why I must never drink that liquid." Her wildly shaking voice was already answering my question. I dropped the final, crushing sentence. At that single phrase, Eleanor's mouth slammed shut, as if it had been bolted down. The deafening screams that had just rattled the windows vanished like a hallucination. Her wide, furious eyes began to violently shake, and the color drained from her face until she looked like a corpse. It was the face of a terrified woman who did not dare to ask exactly how much I knew. Her lips just flapped silently, unable to form a single cohesive word. I calmly bent down and began picking up the scattered foil pouches one by one. I even took a towel from the bathroom, wiped up the spilled puddle of dark liquid, and neatly stacked everything back into the broken box. I pushed the heavy box directly in front of Eleanor's feet. "If you think this is such a waste, Mother, you drink it yourself," I said coldly. "You claimed it was incredibly good for the body, did you not?" Leaving only those words hanging in the air, I walked out and shut the heavy oak door behind me. For a very long time, there was absolutely no sound from the hallway. From that evening onward, the ceramic mugs of dark tea never entered my room again. The expensive electric brewer also completely vanished from the kitchen counter. It was the sudden end of a 7-year ritual. We had both looked at each other's hidden cards. Eleanor was too terrified to test me because she had no idea how deep my knowledge went. I was simply biding my time, gripping the ultimate winning hand. The sprawling Connecticut estate, with its inhabitants no longer eating at the same table, turned into an icebox. A silent, suffocating war of attrition began under the same roof. This suffocating Cold War had dragged on for days. One afternoon, a chaotic crashing sound erupted from the master bedroom. It sounded like the heavy wooden dressers were being ripped apart. I did not even need to ask what she was frantically searching for. She had finally realized that her Stamford Pharmacy bag of pills had vanished from the closet. The sounds of cashmere blankets being thrown against the walls and wooden drawers scraping violently against the floorboards echoed down the hall. Sitting in my room, I simply listened to the chaos in absolute silence. But the next day, a strange, toxic wind began blowing through our affluent town. I was out grocery shopping at the premium organic market when the bakery owner grabbed my arm. Her grip was tight and scolding, like an angry schoolteacher. "Sarah, I just have to say something," she whispered harshly. "After everything your mother-in-law has done for you, how can you go around painting her as a monster? Where in the world can you find a mother-in-law who brews custom health supplements for 7 straight years? How can a person be so cruel?" "Excuse me?" I asked, genuinely taken aback. "What on earth are you talking about? Paint her as what?" "Do not play dumb," she scoffed. "Word is you have been running all over town, telling everyone the tea she made was poisoned or dangerous." I had absolutely no idea what she was talking about. Forcing down the freezing chill creeping up my spine, I asked as calmly as possible, "Where exactly did you hear this?" "I have never said anything like that to anyone. It is completely false, so please do not worry. The woman from the estate across the street told me," she replied defensively. Why would your mother-in-law's own country club friends make up such a lie? The source was revealed instantly. The country club. It was coming directly from Eleanor's own mouth. In the tennis club lounges and the luxury hair salons, the exact same fabricated story had been planted. The moment I sat down in the leather chair at my high-end salon, the stylist leaned in, lowered her voice, and delivered an even more twisted version. Your mother-in-law came in for a blowout the other day and spent the entire hour trashing you, the stylist gossiped. She told everyone that ever since you got pregnant, you have completely lost your mind. She said you are having severe delusions and seeing things that are not there. She had even attached the narrative that pregnancy had driven me clinically insane. It was so absurd that a laugh actually burst out of my mouth. Only then did I fully read her strategy. It was a preemptive strike to brand me as a raving lunatic before I could ever present the evidence to the family. Because the accusations of a crazy daughter-in-law, even with proof, could be dismissed as paranoid hysteria. Walking back from the market, the whispers and stares followed me like a dark shadow. I did not look back, and I kept a bright, unshaken smile on my face. I had zero intention of rolling around in the mud fighting petty town gossip. A direct, devastating frontal assault, that was what I set my mind on. That night, after Mark got home late from his corporate firm, I quietly called him into our bedroom. I locked the heavy oak door. I pulled the vintage suitcase out from the back of the closet and opened it. Mark looked totally bewildered, his eyes darting between me and the luggage. I took out the items I had prepared, placing them on the bed one by one. First, I laid out the private laboratory chemical analysis report. Second, I placed a sealed pouch of the herbal tea right next to it. Third, I pulled out the black Stanford pharmacy bag I had taken from the master bedroom. Mark, listen to me very carefully until I am completely finished, I said, my voice dead calm. This is the official chemical breakdown from a private lab of that wellness tea your mother brewed for me for 7 years. Read the detected substances column right here. Synthetic progestin and estrogen. It is the exact formula for oral birth control. Next to it, the lab attached a clinical note confirming severe, long-term exposure. I pointed to each bolded word on the report with my finger. Next, I shoved my phone into his hands. It showed the Google search results for the exact brand name on the blister packs. I swiped through the high-resolution photos I had taken of the pills, hidden under the cashmere in his mother's closet. I explained everything in chronological order without omitting a single detail, starting from the fertility specialist in Manhattan diagnosing long-term contraceptive exposure, all the way to me submitting the sample to the lab. Wait a minute, Mark stammered, stepping back. What do you mean birth control? Honey, there has to be a mistake here. The lab could have mixed up the samples. There is no way my own mother would never do something like this. This is completely insane. Mark flipped the lab report over and over again, completely frantic. The hand holding the thick paper was shaking violently. His brain was desperately trying to reject a reality he could not bear to accept. I reacted the exact same way, I said softly. I spent 10 days telling myself it was impossible. But Mark, look at this plastic bag. This is not the pharmacy in Greenwich. It is from a pharmacy in downtown Stamford. She drove out of her way to another town for years to hoard these pills just to avoid the local pharmacists who know our family. Does someone do that by mistake? At the mention of the Stamford pharmacy, Mark let out a long, ragged exhale. The mouth that had been frantically searching for excuses snapped shut. And let me ask you one more thing, I continued. You have heard the insane rumors going around town lately, right? The one saying I am going around calling your mother a monster? I have never said a word to anyone. But every single one of those rumors started with your mother's country club friends. Mark, why would someone who did nothing wrong preemptively spread rumors? Why is she desperately trying to convince the whole town that I have gone insane? All the color completely vanished from Mark's face. The preemptive gossip she had planted ended up adding massive weight to the physical evidence. After standing in stunned silence for a long time, Mark suddenly snatched up his phone. I'm going to ask her right now, he growled. I am going to ask her if this is true. I need to hear it from my own mother's mouth. No, Mark, I pleaded, pressing my hand firmly over his thumb on the screen. If you confront her now, she will deny everything. She will destroy whatever evidence is left and spin this to make us look like the crazy ones. Just wait a little longer. We have to seal every single exit before we strike. Mark's eyes rapidly filled with thick tears. The face of a son forced to confront his mother's monstrous betrayal was completely shattered. Setting the phone down, Mark reached for the thick wad of yellowed receipts. He began organizing the faded papers in chronological order across the duvet. Then, his hand suddenly stopped on one specific receipt. Mixed in with the Stamford Pharmacy receipts was a receipt bearing the logo of an old-school naturopathic apothecary. It was a record of her buying entirely separate, specialized raw herbs, completely unrelated to the birth control. That night, Mark sat on the edge of the bed, staring at those receipts until dawn. He did not sleep a single wink. In the morning, with bloodshot eyes, he looked at me and said, "Let's go track down this apothecary first." Mark took the morning off work, and we tracked down the location. It was an exclusive, high-end compounding pharmacy, tucked away in a discreet medical building in Stamford. The moment we pushed the heavy glass door open, the overwhelming scent of dried roots and medicinal herbs hit us. Mark placed the receipt on the glass counter and asked if the owner knew Eleanor. The lead pharmacist adjusted his glasses and began typing her name into his private, secured database. "Ah, I know this lady well," the owner nodded. "Of course I do. She was a very strict customer who only ever paid in crisp cash, so I remember her face perfectly. Never swiped a credit card once. Let me see here. Ah, here it is. Her entire order history is right here." "Sir, when was the very first order placed?" Mark asked. "Please check the exact date." "The first order was right here on this date." The pharmacist pointed to the screen. "And she came in religiously every year after that. See? Just a straight line of orders. She was a very demanding lady who only wanted the most potent stock." "Why do you ask?" "Oh, nothing," Mark choked out. "We just had a family matter we needed to clarify." When the man said the phrase "most potent stock," my fingertips turned ice cold. Mark leaned over the heavy ledger and instantly turned to stone. The date of the very first custom order was during our first year of marriage. It was exactly 2 weeks before I suffered the miscarriage with my first baby. It was far too precise a date to be a coincidence. My heart plummeted all the way to the floor. With violently shaking hands, Mark took photos of every single page of the ledger with his phone. "Sir, I have one massive favor to ask," Mark said, his voice trembling. "If it ever comes down to it, please promise me you will act as a witness to these records. This is a matter of life and death for my family." "Well, the records are exactly as they are written in the book, so I'm sure. Come find me whenever you need," the old man replied, looking slightly alarmed. From there, we drove straight to a highly respected naturopathic doctor in Manhattan. Mark handed over the photos of the herbal ingredients listed in the ledger and asked for a medical translation. The doctor read the Latin and traditional names of the roots one by one. Suddenly, his expression drastically changed, and he looked up at us sharply. "Excuse me, but who on earth consumed this combination of herbs?" the doctor demanded. "Please tell me it was not a pregnant woman." "My wife drank it," Mark said, his voice completely hollow. "She was 2 months pregnant at the time." "Why? What is wrong with it?" "My God. These specific herbs are absolutely forbidden for pregnant women," the doctor said, horrified. "And it is not just 1 or 2 ingredients, it is the entire cocktail. These are powerful abortifacients designed to violently contract the uterus. If this combination is taken during early pregnancy, it will forcefully induce a miscarriage. If someone knowingly brewed this and fed it to a pregnant woman, they did not give her medicine. They handed her a weapon." The word weapon crashed onto the pristine floor of the clinic. In that exact fraction of a second, that specific day 7 years ago flashed vividly in my mind. Right before the miscarriage, Eleanor had sent over a special batch of tea, claiming it was to help me carry the baby. I remembered the dark mug she insisted on heating up herself and bringing right to my bedside, claiming it would cure my severe morning sickness. She had stood over me, watching like a hawk to ensure I drank every last drop before it got cold. I had taken that mug with both hands and thanked her profusely for her kindness. 2 weeks later, I lost my first baby in a pool of blood. It was not just 7 years of forced infertility. Her hands had deliberately murdered my first child. The day I read the lab report, the day I found the black bag of pills in her closet, I had not shed a single tear. But on this day, I completely broke. Sitting in that clinic chair, I finally burst into agonizing, screaming sobs. Calling out for the first baby I never even got to name. 7 years of suffocating grief and betrayal poured out of me in a violent flood. Mark wrapped his arms tightly around my shaking shoulders and broke down weeping right beside me. The doctor silently pushed a box of tissues across the desk. After weeping until my throat bled, I fiercely wiped my face. I clenched my jaw so hard my teeth ached. The time for mourning was over. Now, it was time to collect the ultimate debt. Armed with a formal written statement from the Manhattan doctor, my husband and I turned the car around and sped straight back to the Connecticut estate. When we pulled up the sweeping gravel driveway, Richard was out in the garden pruning his prized rose bushes. Mark offered a brief, tense greeting and marched straight through the front door. Mark and I opened the door to the grand living room side by side. Eleanor was sitting on the plush sofa, watching a daytime talk show. Mark wordlessly pulled the stack of documents from his briefcase and slammed them onto the glass coffee table one by one. The chemical analysis report, the pharmacy receipts, the apothecary ledger photos, the doctor's statement. "Mother, I want you to look very closely at what these are, and explain yourself," Mark demanded, his voice dangerously low. "What is all this garbage?" Eleanor scoffed, glancing at the papers. "I have never seen these in my life. How am I supposed to know what this is?" "It has been 7 years, Mother," Mark roared. "For 7 entire years, you crushed birth control pills into my wife's tea. The chemical breakdown of your precious medicine is right here. And this apothecary receipt? What is this? You bought these exact ingredients 2 weeks before she miscarried. Do you know what the doctor in Manhattan called this? He called it a weapon aimed at a pregnant woman." "This is a forgery!" Eleanor shrieked, jumping up from the sofa. "That bitch forged all of this to frame me. Where did you get these fake pieces of trash to attack your own mother? Are you so bewitched by this garbage woman that you would accuse your own flesh and blood?" She looked ready to spit right in my face. Instead of cowering, she pointed a trembling, manic finger at me, backing me into a corner. I took one heavy step forward, right into the path of that finger. For the first time in 7 years, I raised my voice so loud it shook the crystal chandelier. 7 years, Eleanor. 7 years! I screamed. When you watched me drain that bitter poison every morning and night without leaving a single drop, what the hell was going through your mind? When I bent over backwards to thank you for your dedication, were you laughing at me inside? What about when you watched me sobbing on the steps of the fertility clinic because I thought I was broken? What about the baby in my stomach? My first baby whose heart was beating. What crime did that tiny baby commit against you? You call this a forgery? I sneered, stepping closer. Well, the owner of that Stamford apothecary remembers your face perfectly. He specifically remembers the wealthy lady who only paid in crisp bills. He said he would gladly testify in court. Do you still want to claim you have never seen these papers? Eleanor's mouth opened and closed silently, her eyes darting frantically down to the papers scattered on the glass table. The very next second, she lunged out and viciously swiped at the documents. Her manic hands clawed at the air, trying to rip the evidence to shreds. But Mark was a second faster, snatching the papers off the table and holding them high out of her reach. "Tearing them up will not save you," Mark spat. "I have the originals locked away. I have the digital backups, the photos, and the witnesses. I have everything." Driven entirely into a corner, Eleanor suddenly snapped. She threw her head back and let out a hysterical, screeching yell. "Fine! Yes, I did it! I did it for the good of this family!" she screamed, her face completely twisted. "What did I do wrong? How was I supposed to accept a penniless, low-class girl who brought absolutely nothing into this house as my daughter-in-law? I would rather die than see a grandchild born from that woman's filthy womb." The massive living room went instantly, terrifyingly silent. It was as if someone had dumped a bucket of ice water over the room. In her blind rage, the horrific truth had spilled directly out of her own mouth like a confession. It was a statement she could never take back by crying forgery. She had just admitted to intentionally murdering the child in my womb because of my bloodline. I wrapped my arms protectively around my pregnant belly and stared dead into her crazed eyes. Mark took one slow step backward, He looked at his mother as if he was staring at a literal demon he had never seen before. After a long, suffocating silence, Mark finally opened his mouth. "So this is how you truly felt all along," Mark whispered, his voice completely broken. "I hear you loud and clear. Mom, you are a monster who tried to murder my wife and successfully murdered my child. As of today, you are no longer my mother. Do not ever contact me again." His voice was shaking, but there was not an ounce of hesitation in it. Mark grabbed my hand tightly and pulled me toward the grand foyer. Hysterical screaming erupted behind us. Just as we reached the front door, Richard, still wearing his gardening gloves covered in dirt, walked inside. He had heard the screaming from the driveway. He grabbed Mark's arm as we tried to push past him. "Mark, what on earth is going on here?" Richard demanded. "Why does your face look like that? Do not hide anything from your father. Tell me right now." Mark hesitated for a brief second before pulling the crumpled documents out of his jacket. Showing Richard the lab analysis and the doctor's statement, Mark recounted every single atrocity without leaving out a single detail. He laid out the entire 7-year nightmare, from the daily birth control dosing to the horrific induced miscarriage. He did not even leave out the detail about Eleanor planting rumors at the country club to paint me as clinically insane. As Richard flipped through the papers one by one, his massive hands began to violently tremble. I had never once seen this towering, authoritative man shake so uncontrollably. After reading every last word, Richard marched silently into the living room. "Look me in the eyes and answer me," Richard growled, his voice vibrating with absolute fury. "Is this true? Did you really commit this unspeakable atrocity against the mother of our grandchild?" "So what if I did?" Eleanor shrieked, doubling down in her madness. "I did it to protect our family's status. I hated that girl from the second I laid eyes on her. How could I ever accept the child of some worthless gold digger into our pristine bloodline? I refuse! I will never accept it!" As she kept shrieking at the top of her lungs, Richard's face turned a terrifying shade of purple. Instead of answering, he turned around and marched straight upstairs to the master suite. He ripped the heavy closet doors open and yanked the drawers out completely. He found the remaining stash of birth control pills she had tried to re-hide. Gripping the massive handful of foil packs, Richard dragged them downstairs and hurled them furiously out the open front doors, scattering them across the immaculate stone driveway. The silver foil caught the afternoon sun, glimmering like trash across the pavement. They were not things to be thrown away. They were things to be kept as evidence. I silently walked out onto the driveway, crouched down, and began picking up the scattered pills one by one, dropping them into a large Ziploc bag I had brought. That bitch planted those there," Eleanor screamed from the doorway, pointing at me. "I have never seen those in my life. She is trying to frame me." Her pathetic attempt to lie faded into silence. She had literally just screamed a minute ago that she did it to protect the family's bloodline. Richard's roaring voice shook the very foundations of the mansion. "Shut your mouth," Richard thundered. "You murdered a healthy, beating heart with poison, and you call yourself human? I have shared a bed with you for 40 years, and today I have finally seen the pure evil rotting inside you. I can't live under the same roof as a monster for one more second. We are done. We are getting a divorce." "Divorce? Are you going senile?" Eleanor scoffed, crossing her arms. "Do you really think an old man like you can survive a week without me running this estate? Go ahead, do whatever you want." Eleanor tried to hold her ground with arrogant sneers. But when she looked around and realized that absolutely no one was standing on her side, she began screaming and throwing expensive vases at the walls. After tearing the room apart, she aggressively kicked the front door open and stormed out of the house. A heavy, suffocating silence settled over the ruined living room. A few days passed like a funeral procession. Then, one afternoon, an incredibly wealthy-looking, middle-aged woman knocked firmly on the massive front doors. It happened during the few days Eleanor had fled to a luxury hotel in the city. The woman was impeccably dressed in Chanel, but she was a complete stranger to us. The moment she stepped into the foyer, she demanded aggressively, "Excuse me, I am the owner of the massive equestrian estate over in New Canaan. I came to see the lady of the house. Is she here? How can a family be so incredibly insulting? You aggressively pushed to set my daughter up with your son, and then you just ghost us?" At the word match, Mark, Richard, and I all froze stiff in the foyer. Completely ignoring our shock, the woman continued her rant right in the middle of the hallway. "Just last month, you insisted we lock down a date for them to officially go out," she spat. "My daughter actually believed you and turned down other serious suitors for this. But look at this letter. The lady of this house hand-wrote this to me herself. She raved about how handsome and successful her son was, and promised me that he would be completely single very, very soon. So, what the hell is the holdup?" The thick, cream-colored stationery in the woman's hand was waving wildly. Even from a few feet away, the elegant cursive handwriting was unmistakably Eleanor's. The phrase "completely single" very soon echoed inside my skull like a sledgehammer. For her son to be single, the person who had to be violently removed first was me. Right at that exact second, the front doors swung open, and Eleanor walked in, having returned from her hotel stay. The moment she locked eyes with the woman from New Canaan, all the blood drained from Eleanor's face until it was pure white. She panicked, rushing forward to grab the woman's arm and physically drag her back outside. "Oh my God, Barbara, please!" Eleanor begged frantically. "Let us not do this here. Let us go outside and talk. Please, let us go outside." "Why would we go outside?" the woman snapped, jerking her arm away. "If you have nothing to hide, why can we not talk right here?" That was when Mark stepped out from the shadows of the hallway. "Excuse me, ma'am," Mark said, his voice cold and steady. "I am the son mentioned in that letter, but it seems you have been severely misinformed. I am not going to be single. This woman standing right next to me is my legal wife. And right now, she is carrying my child." "What? What did you just say?" the woman gasped, horrified. "You have a wife and a baby on the way? You tried to forcefully arrange a marriage between my innocent daughter and a married man? What kind of sick, twisted joke is this family running? May God strike this house down." The woman unleashed a torrent of disgust at Eleanor, turned on her Chanel heel, and stormed out, slamming the heavy mahogany door so hard the glass rattled. In the quiet foyer, only the discarded letter and a dead silence remained. Her master plan to throw her daughter-in-law out onto the street and instantly remarry her son to a wealthy heiress had just been exposed by her own arrogance. In that brilliant moment of clarity, the fragmented horrors of the last 7 years snapped together like a puzzle. The birth control pills were merely the foundational groundwork for her ultimate scheme. She had engineered a grand stage to brand me as a barren, defective woman so she would have the perfect justification to completely ruin my life. The hands that set the trap and the hands that brewed the toxic tea belonged to the exact same monster. My grueling 7-year nightmare was just a pawn on her sick chessboard. "Mother, exactly how long have you been plotting this?" Mark screamed, his voice tearing through the silence. "How can you utterly destroy a human being's life to this extent?" Richard was so violently shocked he could not even speak. He was practically leaning against the wall just to keep from collapsing. I slowly rubbed my arms, trying to quell the intense goosebumps breaking out across my skin. And I glared directly into Eleanor's face. The person who needed to run and hide from this house was no longer me. Standing in the center of the foyer, Richard commanded Eleanor to stay exactly where she was. He looked down at his wife with a face filled with absolute, terrifying disgust. "Do not move a single muscle," Richard whispered viciously. "Look at your son. You plotted to tear down a perfectly happy marriage, turn your son into a divorced wreck, and sell him off to another wealthy family. And to achieve that, you poisoned the mother of your grandchild for 7 straight years. You are not a human being. We are completely finished today. I am filing for divorce. Pack your bags and go to the Manhattan penthouse this instant. I do not want you in this house." "Ha! You keep threatening me with that," Eleanor scoffed, trying to mask her panic. "I know it is an empty threat. We have been married for 40 years. You could not survive 3 days in this mansion without me managing it." Before the words even finished leaving her mouth, Richard's massive hand swung through the air. The sickening crack of the slap echoed through the grand foyer over and over again. It was so brutal that Mark and I had to rush forward and physically restrain Richard. "Dad, stop, please stop," Mark yelled, holding his father back. "Use your words. If you do this, you are the one who is going to end up in trouble with the law." "Richard, please calm down," I pleaded. If you hurt yourself over this, it only makes it worse for us. The fact that Mark and I had to physically hold him back should tell you just how explosive his wrath was. Eleanor clutched her stinging red cheek, finally realizing the horrifying reality of the situation. It was not an empty threat. Soon after, the sounds of designer clothes and jewelry being aggressively shoved into Louis Vuitton suitcases echoed from the master suite. Eleanor was packing her bags. Halfway through packing, she walked out and stood in front of Mark's old bedroom door, desperately holding out a shaking hand. "Mark, son, it is your mother," she sobbed pathetically. "Please, look at me. I did it all because I wanted the absolute best for you." Mark did not even look at her hand. He turned his back entirely. The moment she uttered the phrase "for your own best," she severed the last microscopic thread of sympathy he had left. Until the very second she walked out the door, Eleanor never once made eye contact with me. I suppose even she did not have the sheer audacity to look into the eyes she had deceived and poisoned for 7 years. Watching her walk down the grand driveway, rolling her luggage, her shadow looked incredibly pathetic and small. Richard immediately hired top-tier cutthroat lawyers from Manhattan. Armed with all the evidence, he utterly dismantled her in the settlement negotiations and forced her to sign the divorce papers. 40 years of marriage, power, and prestige were wiped out by a single signature. I heard that the supposedly unbreakable Eleanor was shaking so violently when she signed the papers that she could barely hold the pen. Meanwhile, the absolute truth of the scandal rapidly spread through the entire extended family. They all vividly recalled the heavy hints I had dropped at the cousin's wedding reception. They finally realized that the crazy daughter-in-law's claims about the weird tea were entirely, horrifyingly true. Uncle Robert, who had scolded me the harshest, actually drove all the way to our house to apologize in person. "Sarah, I can't even look you in the eye," Uncle Robert said, hanging his head. "I was so utterly cruel to you at that wedding. I called you ungrateful without knowing a single thing. Please let this foolish old man apologize to you. How did you endure those agonizing years all alone?" "It is okay, Uncle Robert," I said gently. "You did not know the truth, so it is perfectly understandable why you said those things. Just the fact that you came all the way here to apologize means the world to me." Having lost both her husband and her son, Eleanor was completely and utterly isolated from the world. Mark and I immediately started looking into premium moving companies. We decided to leave that massive, haunting estate before the baby was born. When the new year rolled around, I gave birth to a perfectly healthy, 7-pound baby girl. Her cries were so incredibly loud and powerful that they echoed down the entire maternity ward. The moment the nurse placed our slippery, crying daughter onto my chest, Mark stood next to the hospital bed and wept like a child. Because it was a child that had taken 7 brutal years to reach us, I fully understood the profound weight of his tears. Mark left the wealthy Connecticut town and bought a beautiful, 4-bedroom colonial house in a quiet, upscale suburb in New Jersey. And just like that, our family of 3 finally had a sanctuary of our own. On the day our daughter reached her 3-month milestone a day, we decided to celebrate with a lavish sip-and-see party. A beautiful catered spread was arranged in our new, sunlit living room. I baked the custom cupcakes and arranged the floral centerpieces myself. It was the very first celebration I put together entirely with my own 2 hands, without relying on anyone else's toxic charity. Holding his granddaughter, who was dressed in a beautiful white lace dress, Richard could not stop beaming with absolute joy. "Oh my goodness, our little princess has the exact same eyes as her mother," Richard cooed. "Here, Sarah, take this. I know I have fallen so short in taking care of you over the years. I am so incredibly sorry, and so deeply thankful. And I already marked my calendar. I am coming down to see my granddaughter at least once a month, so you better be prepared." Richard pressed a small velvet Tiffany box containing an heirloom diamond tennis bracelet into my palm. Even when I politely tried to decline, he stubbornly closed my fingers around it. The warmth radiating from his large, rough hands felt infinitely heavier and more comforting than the diamonds themselves. My mother, who had come from her own home, watched the scene with tears pooling in her eyes. "My beautiful daughter's suffering is finally over," my mother whispered, aggressively wiping her eyes. "How did you survive all those years? I am so proud of you, Sarah. I am so incredibly proud of you." My mother rubbed my back for a very, very long time. Before he left, Richard casually slid a heavy envelope onto the gift table. It was a massive trust fund account he had opened entirely in the baby's name. Nowhere at that party, in any of the photographs or the memories, was there a space for Eleanor, and absolutely no one in that sunlit room missed her presence. However, right around the time we were cutting the cake, perhaps having heard the news of the party through the grapevine, Mark's cell phone began to ring. The caller ID flashing on the screen was his mother. Mark stared down at the glowing screen for a brief second, then quietly flipped the phone face down on the kitchen counter. The next morning, he went to the AT&T store and completely changed his phone number, delivering his final, permanent answer. I sat on the nursery glider, gently holding my daughter's tiny, perfectly formed fingers, and looked down at her sleeping face. The 7 agonizing years that had been brutally stolen from me were finally being unspooled and washed away from within the grasp of those tiny hands. I promised my daughter right then and there that I would love her twice as hard, pouring in all the love I never got to give to my first child. "All right, everyone look over here," the designated photographer Mark yelled from across the room. "To commemorate our beautiful princess. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Mark's joyful countdown echoed through our bright new home. Our family's very first portrait was filled with nothing but radiant, unfiltered smiles. It was a picture featuring only a family that treated me as a human being first and a daughter-in-law second. Considering I had to sacrifice 7 years of my life to get here, it was a truly blindingly beautiful view. Thank you for staying with us through this incredible journey. We will return soon with another captivating story. Thank you.